What happened when an undercover CEO walked into a small-town bakery expecting to find inefficiencies but instead discovered a homeless night shift baker secretly feeding a stray cat? Hello, amazing listeners. You've got a real eye for meaningful stories. Today's tale, Flower and Shelter, will touch your heart with its quiet power. It's a story about compassion, unseen struggles, and a CEO who learns that true leadership isn't built on policies, it's built on people. So get cozy, press play, and find out how one small act of kindness changed 2 lives forever. The clatter of baking trays echoed through the back room of Sugar and Hearth, mixing with the warm scent of cinnamon and yeast. Miles Jensen, sleeves rolled up and an apron dusted with flour, paused at the edge of the supply rack, blinking twice to make sure he saw what he thought he saw. There, crouched by the back door under the flickering light, was a young woman with flour-streaked cheeks and tired eyes, her hands gently placing a sticky bun into a makeshift bowl. A scrawny orange tabby cat crept forward from the shadows, ribs visible under its fur, tail twitching cautiously. "Hey!" The word came out too sharp, too fast, louder than he intended. Tess Rivera froze, her hand mid-air as the cat nuzzled into the pastry. Her eyes flicked up to meet his, wide with guilt, and something else. Quiet defiance. I can explain," she stammered, brushing hair behind her ear with a powdered glove. Miles stepped forward, trying to swallow the irritation in his throat. "Store policy says no animals inside," he said, tone cooler now, "and products meant for sale stay on the shelf." The cat, now licking crumbs off the tray, ignored the tension entirely. "Yeah," she muttered, "I know." Silence pressed between them, thick with the hum of the refrigeration unit and the soft sound of Marmalade, apparently that was his name, chewing contentedly. Tess didn't offer excuses, only a tired shrug. "He's been hanging around a while. I just couldn't let him go hungry." Miles didn't reply at first. He wasn't just a new hire, he was the founder of this place, walking the floor to see the truth behind closed doors. And here it was, unfiltered. A policy broken, a pastry gone, and yet something inside him hesitated. He looked at the cat, then back at her, and instead of repeating the rulebook, he asked, "What's his name?" That simple question softened something in Tess's posture. "Marmalade," she said with a faint smile, "like the filling." And just like that, the scolding he came to deliver fell away, replaced by a weight in his chest he hadn't expected. Tess sat back on her heels, brushing crumbs from her apron as Marmalade licked his whiskers with lazy contentment. Miles leaned against a metal rack nearby, arms crossed, watching the interaction in silence. The cat's trust in her was obvious. He didn't flinch, didn't run. Instead, he purred softly and nudged his head into her palm like this was a nightly routine. "He won't let anyone else near him," Tess said, voice softer now, as if they were no longer co-workers but 2 strangers sharing a secret. "Only me. I think he's been through stuff." She didn't look at Miles when she said it, but something in her tone suggested she wasn't just talking about the cat. Miles studied her, early 20s, dark circles under her eyes, a quiet resilience in the way she held herself. Not proud exactly, but determined. "I know it's against the rules," she continued, glancing at him now, "but I figured if I cleaned up after him and didn't waste much, it wouldn't really hurt anything." Miles didn't answer. In his office 2 cities away, policy manuals and efficiency reports would tell a different story. Inventory loss was inventory loss, no matter how noble the reason. But here, in the dim light of a bakery's back room with a scrawny cat licking icing from its paw and a young woman crouched beside him like this was the most important moment of her day, it didn't feel like theft. It felt like grace. "You do this every night?" he asked. Tess gave a small shrug. "Not always, only when there's extra, or when I know no one's watching." Miles nodded slowly, fighting the instinct to remind her that someone had been watching now. Instead, he asked, "Why him?" Tess tilted her head, considering. "I guess I see a little of myself in him. Scrappy, hungry, figuring it out alone." She chuckled, but there was no humor in it, just honesty. Marmalade curled at her feet now, eyes half closed, trusting that this corner of the world was safe. Because she made it so. Miles wasn't sure what rule she'd broken anymore, only that she'd honored something deeper. He could have written her up, sent a warning to HR, and ended it with a cold correction. But the truth was, her quiet act of kindness had just taught him more about humanity than any leadership seminar ever had. He looked down at the cat, then back at Tess. "He's lucky he found you." Her lips twitched into the faintest smile. "I think we found each other." As the night wore on, Miles kept his distance, falling into the rhythm of a new hire while his eyes stayed on Tess. She moved through her tasks with a quiet efficiency that surprised him. Not rushed, not lazy, but deliberate. She portioned dough like it was second nature, wiped down counters between batches without being asked, and rotated the displays up front with a practiced hand. No wasted movement. No complaints. There was a small whiteboard above the prep table labeled Staff Notes. Next to the scribbled list of shortages and temperature logs, Miles noticed a neat line in different handwriting. "Don't forget, banana bread goes to the shelter Thursdays. Tea." He raised an eyebrow. That hadn't been mentioned in any manager report. Later, when a delivery driver popped in for the 3 a.m. bread pickup, Tess greeted him by name, handed him an extra coffee from her own thermos, and slipped a bag of day-old pastries into the van's back seat. "For the women's shelter," she said simply, before turning back to knead dough. She didn't wait for thanks, didn't boast, just kept going. Miles had read employee profiles and performance evaluations before arriving. Tess was barely mentioned. She was marked quiet, reliable, and on time. But what he saw now painted a fuller picture. She didn't just do the job. She filled the cracks left by everyone else. When the mixer jammed, she fixed it. When flour ran low, she adjusted the batch recipe without blinking, and when a new trainee almost spilled a tray of danishes, she caught it mid-fall, steadying the moment with a calming, "Hey, it's okay, happens to all of us." Miles found himself caught off guard, not just by her skill, but by the way she seemed to carry the whole shift on her back without anyone noticing. She had the kind of presence that didn't shout, but steadied everything around her. And she did it all while still keeping half an ear open for the soft scratching at the back door, just in case Marmalade returned. Miles, watching from the register station, realized something unsettling. If he hadn't come undercover, he never would have known someone like Tess existed. Her name would have stayed buried in the margins. But tonight she stood out, like a quiet light in the corner of a room nobody remembered to look at. When the shift ended just past sunrise, Miles clocked out alongside Tess, pretending to stretch and yawn like any tired employee. She gave him a small nod, polite but distant, then slung her backpack over one shoulder and stepped into the cold morning light. Miles hesitated, then followed from a distance, keeping just far enough not to be noticed. Tess didn't head toward the nearby bus stop or the cafe where some staff grabbed breakfast after late shifts. Instead, she took a quiet path behind a strip mall, past dumpsters and loading docks, before cutting across a lot full of abandoned cars and forgotten shopping carts. She stopped in front of a dented, rust-colored van, parked near a chain-link fence. The back windows were covered with newspaper, the front seat stacked with blankets and bags. Without a second glance around, she opened the passenger door, tossed in her backpack, and climbed into the driver's seat. But she didn't start the engine. She just sat there. Miles ducked behind a row of hedges, his breath fogging in the early morning chill as he watched her rest her head on the steering wheel. A moment later, she reached behind her, pulling a blanket over her lap, curling her knees into the seat. The reality settled on him like a heavy coat. This van wasn't just a ride. It was home. The sandwich she barely touched during her break made sense now. So did the thermos she refilled with bakery sink water, the way she folded unused paper towels and tucked them into her coat pocket. Every small action throughout the night had pointed to a deeper truth. Tess wasn't just scraping by. She was surviving. Alone. Invisible. He felt a tight knot form in his chest, a mixture of guilt and disbelief. How many others like her had he passed in the hallways of his company? How many went unnoticed in his spreadsheets of labor hours and quarterly projections? Miles stayed crouched behind the hedges a few moments longer before turning and walking back to his own car. Sleek, warm, parked under a reserved sign. He sat behind the wheel, gripping the steering wheel but not starting the engine, staring through the windshield at nothing. Something had shifted. He had come to the bakery to observe operations, maybe fire underperformers, maybe streamline roles. But what he'd found instead was a young woman sleeping in a van, with flour on her sleeves and too much weight on her shoulders. The next night, Miles arrived earlier than his shift required. The storefront was still dark, but the faint glow from the back kitchen was already flickering behind the frosted glass. He stepped inside to find Tess alone, apron already tied, humming softly as she rolled dough with practiced hands. She looked up, surprised. "You're early," she said, brushing flour off her palms. "Figured I'd try to look competent on day 2, he joked lightly, and to his quiet relief she cracked the barest smile. As they worked side by side, the silence between them softened into something more comfortable. She didn't talk much at first, but when he asked how she'd learned to braid challah with such precision, the conversation began to flow. "Art school," she said, keeping her eyes on the dough. "Dropped out a few years ago when things got complicated." Miles didn't push. She paused, then added, "My mom got sick. I had to go home, take care of her. Jobs came and went, bills piled up, you know how it goes." Her tone was steady, but her hands moved a little faster, as if to distract from the memories. "She passed last spring," Tess continued. "Since then, I've just been trying to keep my head above water." She shrugged like it was nothing. Like explaining away homelessness was a story she'd told too many times to feel the weight of it anymore. Miles felt a familiar sting behind his ribs. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. She waved a hand like she didn't want sympathy. "You do what you have to. This job, it's not much, but it's steady. I bake, I clean, I feed Marmalade. It's something." The cat's name brought a faint smile to her lips again, and Miles saw a flicker of warmth beneath the worn-down fatigue in her expression. "You ever think about leaving?" he asked. "Starting fresh somewhere else?" Tess looked over at him, eyes sharp with something between realism and resilience. "Sure, but starting over takes money and I'm still saving up for square one." Her honesty disarmed him. No bitterness, no self-pity, just facts. She worked hard, stayed late, helped others, and still lived in a van. Miles realized for all the hardship, she hadn't once asked for anything, not even sympathy. She just wanted to be seen, to matter. As Marmalade appeared at the back door again, tail flicking expectantly, Tess gave Miles a sideways glance. "Think we can spare a blueberry scone tonight?" He smiled without thinking. "I think that can be arranged." Later that night, the swinging door to the front clattered open and in walked Lori, mid-50s, blazer over her bakery polo, clipboard in hand, and an air of authority that entered the room before she did. "Miles, right?" she asked, barely glancing up. "New hire?" He nodded. "Welcome aboard. Just a heads up, we've had a lot of waste issues lately. Make sure you're logging everything, especially damaged goods. Corporate's been breathing down our necks about margins." She didn't wait for a reply, turning immediately to Tess. "How's that back shelf inventory coming?" "I want all expired items recorded and binned. No freebies, no take-home. Company policy." Tess responded with a quiet, "Yes, ma'am," her gaze fixed on the countertop. Lori didn't seem to notice the tension, only continued flipping through her clipboard. "And be mindful of your prep timing. Flour prices went up again. We can't afford to lose another bag to over-measuring." Then, with a perfunctory nod, she disappeared into the office. The silence that followed was heavier than before. Miles glanced at Tess. Her face hadn't changed, but her hands moved faster, tighter, robotic now. "She always like that?" he asked softly. "Efficient?" Tess said flatly. "Keeps the store running? I guess that's what matters." But Miles knew better. He had read the reports Lori submitted, charts, graphs, cost-cutting memos, all clean, all in line with the company's bottom line. And yet, nowhere in those neatly typed summaries did it mention how the staff actually felt, how policies meant to tighten efficiency had instead created fear and burnout. Lori saw Tess as a reliable body filling a shift, not the person quietly donating leftovers to shelters or calming a trainee on the verge of tears. Miles felt his stomach twist. The disconnect between management and humanity wasn't just a flaw, it was a failure, and it was his. He had designed this system, built it on numbers and productivity, never realizing how many people it overlooked. Watching Tess work under the weight of being unseen, he couldn't help but think, How many other efficient stores were quietly breaking their people? After Lori's visit, Miles found it harder to stay in character. He continued kneading dough, wiping counters, restocking ingredients, but his mind was elsewhere. Every checklist, every efficiency guideline, every streamlined system he'd implemented as the owner of Sugar and Hearth now felt like it had been designed in a vacuum. He had believed in those decisions, believed that paying a fair wage, offering standard benefits, and maintaining productivity standards were enough. But Test's quiet resilience and Lori's cold adherence to policy told a different story. He remembered approving a policy last year to eliminate waste losses across all stores, meant to stop employee theft. But here, Tess wasn't stealing, she was compensating for what the system didn't see. A few pastries for a shelter, a scone for a stray, a human gesture that policy didn't account for. And somehow, she still showed up every night, still worked harder than anyone, still stayed quiet while others took credit. Miles had sat in too many boardrooms, staring at data sheets, never imagining the people behind those numbers might be sleeping in their vans or skipping meals just to survive another shift. He'd told himself his company was better than most, ethical, sustainable, community-focused. But standing in the back kitchen, watching Tess scrub a baking tray with tired hands, he realized how much he'd overlooked. There was no column for compassion in his spreadsheets, no metric for dignity. And yet here it was right in front of him, in the quiet way Tess cleaned up after herself, in the way she shielded Marmalade from scolding, in the unspoken pride she took in doing things right, even when no one was watching. Miles had built a business. Tess reminded him what it meant to be human. He couldn't look at the bakery, or his role in it, the same way again. Not after this. Not now. Not when he'd finally seen the cracks beneath the polished numbers. And for the first time in years, Miles didn't know what the next step in the business plan was. He only knew that something had to change, and it had to start with him. The following night, Miles didn't bother pretending he wasn't waiting for her. Tess arrived, bundled in the same faded hoodie, backpack slung low over one shoulder, dark circles a little deeper beneath her eyes. She gave a small wave when she saw him outside the employee entrance, but her steps slowed when she noticed the look on his face. Hesitant, serious. "Everything okay?" she asked. Miles took a breath, nerves tight in his chest. "Tess?" "I know." Her brows pulled together. "Know what?" "That you're living in your van," he said quietly. "That you've been getting by on what little you can, barely holding it all together." She froze, the color draining from her face. Her hands gripped the straps of her backpack a little tighter. "I don't know what you think you saw." "Don't do that," Miles said gently. "You don't have to explain anything to me. I'm not here to shame you." She looked around as if expecting someone to jump out and catch her in the act. "Why are you telling me this? What do you want?" "I want you to know I see you," he said simply. "Really see you." Her jaw tightened. "So what? You want to feel better about yourself? Offer me a pity bonus? I'm not a charity case." "I know you're not. That's why I'm not offering charity." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a sealed envelope. "This is back pay. For the extra hours you've worked, the overtime you were never clocked in for, the donations, the kindness, everything no one noticed. But I did." She stared at it, not moving. "You're serious." "Dead serious." "Why?" Her voice cracked a little. "Because I thought I understood how to lead. I thought numbers told the whole story. You proved me wrong. You reminded me why this place exists in the first place." For a long moment she didn't speak. Her lip trembled, her fingers flexed, like she didn't know whether to take the envelope or run. "What if I say no?" she whispered. "Then I'll still show up tomorrow, and the next day, until you believe you don't have to do this alone anymore." Finally she reached out and took the envelope like it might shatter in her hands. Her voice was barely a whisper. "You don't owe me this." "Maybe not," Miles said, placing a hand on her shoulder. "But I owe it to the kind of company I thought I was building, and to people like you who've been holding it up all along." The air between them hung heavy as Tess slipped the envelope into her hoodie pocket, still not fully convinced it wasn't all a dream or some elaborate trick. She glanced at Miles, searching his face. "Who are you, really?" she asked, suspicion mingling with exhaustion in her voice. Miles hesitated only a moment before answering, "I'm not just some new hire." He held her gaze. "My name is Miles Jensen. I'm the founder of Sugar and Hearth." The words hit like a stone dropped in still water. Tess blinked, stunned. "You're... what?" "I came here undercover," he continued gently, "to understand what life was really like on the floor. What I found was more than I ever expected." Tess's face flushed with disbelief, embarrassment, and a flicker of betrayal. "So this whole time was real," he said quickly. "I wasn't acting when I listened, or when I helped, or when I saw what you were doing, what no one else has seen." She fell quiet, absorbing the weight of it all. Then, in a softer voice, he added, "You deserve better, Tess. Not just back pay, but a role that reflects everything you bring to this place." He handed her a second envelope, this one thinner but no less important. "It's a promotion, shift manager, higher pay, guaranteed hours. And we're launching a pilot housing support program. You'll be the first to benefit." Tess stared at him, overwhelmed. "Why me?" Miles smiled. "Because you already act like you run the place. Now you'll just get credit for it." Her lip trembled, and for the first time since he'd met her, she didn't fight the emotion. She simply nodded, clutching both envelopes like lifelines. For the first time in a long time, someone had seen her worth. And it wasn't a handout, it was recognition. A week later, the morning light spilled through the bakery windows, casting a golden glow across the polished counters and fresh trays of croissants. The storefront buzzed with early customers, the smell of warm cinnamon rolls curling into the air. Behind the counter, Tess stood straighter than before, clean hoodie replaced with a crisp uniform embroidered with her name. Her eyes were brighter. Sleep no longer a luxury, but something she finally had again. She moved with confidence now, giving quiet directions to a trainee and adjusting a display with practiced ease. Marmalade, clean and fed, lounged near the front window in a little bed marked "Store Cat, Employee of the Month." Customers chuckled as they passed, offering him soft hellos. Miles watched it all from the corner of the store, coffee in hand, heart full. He wasn't in disguise anymore, just himself, still learning how to lead differently. Lori had been reassigned to a new role with proper retraining, and a new store policy, built with employee input, was being tested here first. "Looks good in here," he said, as Tess passed by. She smiled. "Feels good, too." "You settling in okay?" "Better than okay," she replied, then hesitated. "Thank you for everything." Miles nodded, humbled. "Just promise me one thing," he said. "When someone else walks through those doors and they're struggling, you do what you did for Marmalade." Tess glanced at the cat, then back at him with a soft grin. "You mean feed them pastries?" "No," he chuckled. "See them." She gave a small nod, one hand resting on the counter like it grounded her. And just like that, the bakery didn't just smell of sugar and cinnamon anymore. It felt like hope. A quiet beginning to a new chapter, for both of them. The story of Flour and Shelter teaches a powerful lesson about seeing beyond numbers and policies to the real people who keep a business alive. Through Miles's undercover experience, we learn that leadership isn't just about efficiency or profitability, it's about empathy, awareness, and responsibility. Tess, despite her own hardships, embodies quiet strength and kindness, doing what's right even when no one is watching. Her actions reveal the blind spots in corporate systems that often overlook those most in need. The story challenges the idea that following the rules is always the highest virtue, reminding us that sometimes compassion is the greater act. Miles' transformation from a detached owner to someone who truly sees his employees shows that meaningful change begins with listening and acting on what's often left unsaid. The lesson is clear. True leadership requires heart, not just a title. And sometimes the smallest gestures, feeding a stray cat, saving a sandwich, offering a second chance, can spark the biggest changes. In the end, Flour and Shelter is a story about dignity, second chances, and the quiet heroes who show up every day, hoping to be seen, not saved, just seen. And that small shift in perspective can change everything.